This is exactly what happens when I clean out my shop. I hate taking the time to cut up these longer scraps so that they can fit in the fire pit. So I think today I'm going to build a separate fire pit just for the sole purpose of burning longer scraps. I'm going to be making my burn pit from a 55-gallon steel drum barrel. I actually found them on Craigslist from a local guy. Now, I did make sure to pick out a barrel that used to not contain hazardous material, but still, I wanted to rinse it out, so I filled it full of some water and some Dawn, and then just rolled it around my yard. But then I moved it inside my shop and started working on cutting the top off. Now, my idea is to have it on its side and for it to be almost like a trough. And I wanted the sidewalls to be left high so that I could really just pile in a whole lot of wood. Now, to make the actual cut, I'm going to be using a plasma cutter that Lincoln Electric recently sent to me. It is the Tomahawk 375, and it's really cool because it has a built-in air compressor on it. It does run off 220, but in my shop that's not a problem because I have 220 outlets everywhere. So all I did was ground off a little paint so I could ground it properly and then set a flat bar in place to act as a guide for my torch to make a very straight cut. And honestly, this is the first time using a plasma cutter, and I cannot believe how sort of plug-and-play ready this machine is. Whenever I was learning welding, I took an entire day to practice before actually getting started on my project. On this one, I made maybe 4 practice cuts, and then I just jumped in on this barrel because it's literally a pull the trigger, move the torch along my guide, and just watch the pace to make sure I'm not moving too quickly. And it's very easy to tell when you're moving too quickly because the sparks will go through the material whenever it cuts all the way through, but then the sparks will bounce back at you if you don't. But especially on the thinner material for this barrel, it made the cut very, very easy. So then I moved on to making a base for it to sit on. Now for the base, I'm going to be using some cutoffs that a buddy gave to me, so I'm pretty much keeping the shape. But I did need to trace the curve of the barrel onto the plate, so I did that by making a template out of cardboard, tracing it, and then cutting that. Now this steel is 1/4 inch thick, and you can see that it took me a second to figure out what pace I needed to move at to really cut all the way through it. All of those sparks bouncing up back towards me means that I'm moving just a little bit too quickly. But it's very easy to adjust and adapt. And if you end up missing a spot where it doesn't cut all the way through, it's also very easy to come back through a second time and complete the cut. After making the cut, I did come back through with a right angle grinder to clean up what they call the dross, the byproduct or the buildup from making the cut on the back side of the metal. And then I just started playing around with what the rest of the base will look like. I used the cardboard template to just create a few more curves here and there, and then I grabbed a roll of electrical tape to do some circles. I was kind of going for an industrial look. However, I wanted it to be symmetrical, so I only traced out half of the circles. But when I have these cut, I'll flip it over and use it as a template for the rest. I did try to cut out a circle freehand first, and it just came out looking awful. So what I ended up doing was cutting out a circle on the bandsaw and clamping that into place to use as a guide. And this actually worked really well. And for anything straight, flat bar works great as a temporary guide. And just a tip, working around metal, I'm always wary of burning my hands, so I always give it a few pats before actually grabbing a hold of it. The smaller circles I wanted to cut were too small to have a solid circle template, so instead I cut the outside of the circle and used my spindle sander to clean up the cut. Then I could clamp this into place and once again use it to guide around my torch and make those smaller circles come out nice and clean. I did come back through with a die grinder real quick just to clean them up. But then I used this piece as a template to start making my second piece. So I used it to make the curve at the top on the second piece, and then also used it as my template to make the circles on the second piece. So once I got all of the circles traced, then I could cut them out, and then now reverse the roll so that this is the template to get the holes symmetrical on the original piece. Now at this point, I was building a lot of confidence and also just becoming more familiar with the machine, so I actually started freehanding these circles. But I think using templates is a good way to go in the very beginning, but know that once you get comfortable using the machine, it's very easy to freehand and actually get it looking nice. Just a few modifications on the barrel itself. I did go ahead and turn it on its end and drill 3 holes on either side just to increase a little bit of the airflow. Then while I was at it, I went ahead and cut in a larger circle on this side just to match the other. To give the base a more industrial look and also just a little bit more stability to stand on, I went ahead and grabbed some flat bar and welded it into place. Or actually, I just tacked it into place. And what I tried to do was make the tacks kind of bigger and spaced evenly so that they almost look sort of like rivets, and to where they kind of go along with the look of the base. For any of the surfaces that needed a bend put into it, I would kind of just guesstimate at what the flat bar needed to be at, tack it on one side, kind of beat on it a little bit, and then just continue to tack it as I was bending it. And just as a tip, if you're going to be using your super gels as a workbench, I placed a 2x4 under my piece of OSB so I could have a stable beating on surface, if that's a thing. After doing that for both of the bases, then I could set the barrel in place and see how it looks. And to be honest, it did look a lot cooler in my head when I was originally thinking of it, but I'm moving forward with it because it's definitely going to do what I need it to do. So I leveled up the base on both of the sides and then started also tacking it into place. Then just to give a little bit more stability, I welded on a pipe, which I centered up to the center hole on both of the bases. Then I scraped it clean of the old paint, gave it a fresh coat of high temp paint, and then started burning my scraps, which it holds quite a few of. Now, I didn't build this to stand around, although it does put off a great amount of heat. But this is for whenever I want to clean out my shop, I can light it up and then just very quickly toss in the scraps and then get right back to work.